Are you ready to learn? We're staring at the map. We I don't know have like a rough recollection where our states, where our colonies are located. I can tell you, my son, who's a fifth grader, his first week of school got a blank map of the United States, and he has to start like filling in the colonial or filling in all the regions. He's a fifth grader. You guys are college students. I would think that you guys could do it. I'll tell you as a heads up on a quiz, I'm going to put some colonies like Georgia on there because it's known as a buffer colony above Spanish Florida. I'll say, which of the colony or which of the letters represents the Chesapeake region? And then could you find the Chesapeake if I randomly put like an A and a B and a C and a D somewhere on the map of colonial America?
Yes.
The Chesapeake, and that's the Chesapeake Bay. And remember, Virginia, Maryland, those are our Chesapeake colonies. I would not nitpick on a quiz and ask you to find Connecticut, Rhode Island, and too close. But I figure Massachusetts would be fair game. I mean, Massachusetts, technically, this and this is all Massachusetts, and that was our most populated colony. I haven't taught you about it yet, but maybe you're remembering some of the good details from way back in the day. So just heads up, looking at the map of colonial America, you'll see it like 5 more times through the slideshow. So like mental image, click, click, and maybe you got a photographic memory and you commit that stuff to the memory bank and ace it when you see it next time, you'll be fine. Okay, quickly recapping yesterday. Quickly recap yesterday, and again, I always do this. This is when we ask questions, quickly recapping the factors that led to English colonization. Remember these guys? They see the opportunity in the New World. They see what Spain's bringing over with all of the gold, all of the silver, and these glorified pirates are stealing some of that for the crown. And they're making so much money off of this, they decide, hey, we should get ourselves one of these colonies. We remember the first attempt at colonization, Roanoke. But it's a big fail because of poof mystery, whatever did happen. And by the way, how's Spain feel about this? They're getting ticked off. They're getting ticked off that England's invading their turf, starting a colony in their side of the world. They're getting mad that these pirates are stealing the booty, right? So Spain's going to try to end them in 1588. They are going to send that invincible Spanish Armada to destroy England. Well, how does that work out? Yeah, England, they win, and that door is now flung wide open, so not only they have kind of an open door to colonize, the rest of Europe does as well. So just kind of think, that turning point year is major, and you can see the factors pushing England to colonize. If you need a few other randoms, you do have the surplus population, which is now, 100 years after Columbus, and I told you that the food coming over feeds Europe. It's now to the point of a surplus population, and many do go to the New World for that extra land, for the opportunity. And of course, there's the money-seeking venture and the economic organization of a joint stock company. In fact, you remember the name of the joint stock company that founds Jamestown? The Virginia Joint Stock Company. And their purpose is to find money and make money. Didn't work out all that well at first because they're digging for gold. But what is ultimately the money maker in all of the Chesapeake? Tobacco. Good if you remember this stuff. And again, it's a review. We covered it yesterday. I don't think you should be madly writing down every single word because technically you have this in the memory bank. So think at first, it's all about money. Later, you're going to see religion being a factor. Like those Puritans, the Pilgrims, people that you may have heard of, they're coming over for religious reasons. But at first, they're coming over to make money. And I think you clearly see that as their aim with the Sea Dog factor, with a joint stock company searching for gold and ultimately tobacco being their money maker. Any questions on this before I move forward and give you new colonial detail? Anything you need clarified? All right. I think this is pretty much covered as well. I just put the specific name of the war. But basically in the Chesapeake, they're farming tobacco. Tobacco kills the soil, so they have to keep moving westward to find new soil. And fortunately for them, there's a whole lot of land that you can farm. Unfortunately for the natives, they're going to be taking their land. So the natives, I mean, they're going to try to fight to hold their land. But how do the natives do in these wars? They're outmanned, they're outgunned, they're sick, they're dying from random diseases. The natives are going to lose just about every single one of these wars for the next, several hundred years. And you guys can follow a pattern here that should start to make some sense. But yes, let's note Anglo-Powhatan Wars. Remember Chief Powhatan? Remember his daughter? Pocahontas. And by the way, the marriage of his daughter to tobacco man John Rolfe was supposed to be a lasting peace. It's not, because the colonists keep coming and they keep needing more land because, again, tobacco is destroying the soil. So they continue to move west. They continue to encounter natives, and about every 20 to 30 years, you're going to get another war pop up. And just kind of think about it. The natives are not going to win. What do they do when they lose a war? They got to move further to the interior. They got to move further to the frontier, but the colonists keep on coming. Give it 20, 30 years, they regroup, there's another war, they lose again, and then they're going to move further away until the colonists want that land. This goes on, by the way, until 1890. 1890 will be the last of the Indian Wars, where they're pushed to the far pockets that no one else wanted. So I'll be telling this time and time again. Making sense? Hey, let's look at Maryland, our other Chesapeake colony. Again, the Chesapeake, Virginia, Maryland. Virginia, Maryland. In Maryland, I feel like you guys know this. You guys know that their primary source of labor is not African slaves. It's these guys who come over for 4 to 7 years, they work, and then they're given freedom. Yay, primary knowledge. Indentured servants, or indentured servitude. I'm going to have to preview this and foreshadow something, but the life of an indentured servant stinks. They're first off lucky to survive their 4 to 7 years. If they do survive it, they get some bad land in Indian country that's probably destroyed from prior tobacco farming. So you guys are going to put some pieces together that the life of an indentured servant is kind of stinky. Meanwhile, the rich get richer. This is what I would write down with the headright system. It's a way of bringing more indentured servants over, but the way it works, if you're, say, a plantation owner, if you've got money, you pay the passage of an indentured servant, and then you get 50 more acres of land. You pay for another, you got another 50 acres. You keep paying for indentured servants, you get 50 acres for each one that you're bringing over, and that's why I said the rich get richer under the headright system. Meanwhile, how are these indentured servants doing? Stinky, bad, dismal. Life is not pleasant for an indentured servant or a former indentured servant. But the rich guys, man, they got all the great land. So what I'm foreshadowing is a mega rebellion of former indentured servants. And I don't know if you remember this from way back in the day. It's okay if you forgot. But just tell yourself that the life of an indentured servant is so troubling, so bad, they're going to have a major rebellion in the late 1600s, and that'll be our transition to African slavery. But for most of the 1600s, it's indentured servitude. By the 1700s, we'll transition to African slavery in full, and you'll see why as we go further. One other thing about Maryland. It's a safe place for Catholics. Not all religions. They would not welcome Jews. But if you did believe, say, in the Trinity, any Christian branch would be welcome. So it's made as a safe place for Catholics in particular, because Catholics would be persecuted elsewhere. And you guys got to remember this rivalry, this hatred between Protestants and Catholics, it was fierce. They go to war against each other. They hate each other because of these religious differences. Today it's a lot watered down, but Catholics need a safe place, and they get their safe place in Maryland. So you're seeing seeds of religious freedom in America, but it's only Maryland for Catholics. You'll get one other colony that has religious freedom, But you know what would happen to a Catholic if they went to Massachusetts? Well, they could be killed. Massachusetts hates Catholics. So just kind of think of this. They need a safe place. We've got a little bit of religious freedom, at least in Maryland. Making sense? All right. One more year to add to the pile. And I hope I'm not overwhelming you with years. I mean, I've only given 3 so far. It's kind of covered up, but 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. 1588 is on the list. I've now said that, what, like 1,588 times. Defeated the Spanish Armada. You guys remember 1607? Jamestown. We'll now add 1619 to the list. And this one's important. It's a turning point for 2 reasons, one good, one bad. We get the first representative government in the Americas. It's in Virginia. And again, I feel like deep in your brain, there's some prior knowledge that knows the name of this representative system. It's the Virginia House of Burgesses. So the Virginia House of Burgesses, it is representative government, but it's specifically called the Virginia House of Burgesses. And I know I'm not spelling Burgesses for you, but remember, Quizlet is your friend. You've got all these things defined, and you could probably sound out Burgesses with like a B and a G and a bunch of S's. So the Virginia House of Burgesses, and why is this a big deal? We get to pick our leaders. That's kind of incredible if you think about us versus the rest of the world. We have a democratic system. We have representative government where you have the power to choose. Other countries, those people are appointed or it's like hereditary. And those people can be dictatorial and bad where the people have no voice. But yay us, we get to pick. Granted, some flaws in this system. And a major flaw would be the fact that, well, a lot of slaves start to come over. That's the other reason this is important. 1619, the first African slaves are sold in the colonies. And we're going to increase and increase and increase our number of slaves throughout kind of the colonial times and even early American history. And that will clearly be a problem. So 1619, important for a good reason, Virginia House of Burgesses. Bad reason, first African slaves are sold in the colonies. Making sense? All right, life in the Chesapeake, bleh, dismal. You can't get married men because it's a 3-to-1 ratio of men to women. And if you are one of the exclusive women in the Chesapeake, you're probably not going for average Joe indentured servant, former indentured servant. You might go for one of those plantation owners or one of their kids. You die on a daily basis in the Chesapeake. What is the life expectancy today? Do you have a ballpark idea of how long we're supposed to live today? Maybe 80. It kind of hovers in the high 70s. It was 40 in the Chesapeake. I'd probably be dead in the Chesapeake. So just kind of think, you get bit by a mosquito, you get malaria, you die. All sorts of random diseases that they have no medicine for. You're dying on a daily basis. You don't have a sense of community. Minimal churches, minimal schools. Oh, you're also poor. The land is terrible. Are you starting to see how life in the Chesapeake, it's like, terrible? Cherry on top, let's say that you're a former indentured servant living in the frontier. Who's your neighbor that doesn't want you there? You're a former indentured servant, you're forced way out into the frontier. Who's your neighbor that wants to kill you? Yeah. Life in the Chesapeake is not pleasant. And what you guys are doing with all of this information, you're eventually going to have to write, say, a short answer comparing this to another region. I can tell you the region that is almost the exact opposite of the Chesapeake. I can tell you the region that comes over as a family unit where women have 10 kids. You live 20 to 30 years longer. It's all about churches and schools. You're economically well off. There's great soil. You know the region that I'm talking about that's different? Massachusetts. So you don't know much about Massachusetts yet, but I think you do yourself a favor in your notes if you Massachusetts is the opposite of most of this. Because that's what I have you guys compare it to. Massachusetts will be dramatically different when we compare social, details. So just kind of think, compare and contrast. You have a lot of contrasting elements. There is one or even two similarities, though, with Massachusetts. You'll find Indian problems will be a similarity just about everywhere. So hopefully that makes some sense with daily life in the Chesapeake. I got to jump to another colonial region. You're feeling good on the Chesapeake. Any Chesapeake questions? Let's jump to the middle. This is New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And sorry for the New Jersey fans, I don't really have much I'm going to share about New Jersey. Delaware, I guess I at least gave them a shout out with Word de la War, but I don't say much about Delaware either. My focus is on them as a whole, with some detail on New York and especially Pennsylvania. Now, the first question I ask is about their fertile soil and their export and kind of their nickname. I know on, say, a Friday quiz, it'll be the Middle Colonies are known as the blank blank because of their export of like wheat. Aha! The bread basket, the bread colonies, the Middle Colonies, aka the bread basket, exporting wheat. So there's some economic detail, and they do great with all of that land and fertile soil. So the bread colonies were the bread basket. And then the other thing I ask about the middle is about their diversity. They're not all English there. In fact, my people were the original settlers of New York. Or my people, the Dutch. The Dutch originally settled New Amsterdam. So I'll give you a little bit of Dutch history. But my point is, you've got Dutch, you've got Germans, you've got Swedes that go to Delaware. Yes, you have English as well, but you've got a lot of different points of origin. That's unique, that stands out. You want to know the least diverse colony? It's again going to be Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, by the way, if you are not pure-blooded, super Puritan, you're kicked out or killed. But in this region, hey, you could be kind of different. This is the most diverse region in colonial America. Now, as for the Dutch, you might know this deal. They're going to buy Manhattan, and I don't even know if I'm going to say they buy Manhattan. They get Manhattan in what becomes the probably greatest real estate deal in American history. You're familiar, like Manhattan, this is New York City, where it's like $15,000 a month just to rent an apartment. You want to buy land in New York City today, you need like $20 million just to get a little side shack on the corner somewhere. What did the Dutch get it for? Worthless trinkets and shiny objects. Bought it from Indians. Bought it from Indians. And let's say the Indians didn't feel great about this deal, and there's soon conflict between the Dutch and the neighboring tribes, because it was kind of taken from them. So the Dutch have to build up a big wall on a street. There's a picture of the wall. Have you guys ever been to New York City, been to Manhattan? Well, you can see parts of that wall in New York City today. And by the way, it's on a street named after building this wall. You know what I'm talking about?
Wall Street.
Wall Street. It's called Wall Street. If you've ever heard of Wall Street, it's the financial capital of the world. It's where they do all the stock trading. But Wall Street got its name because the Dutch had to build a wall to protect themselves from the natives. Another Dutch thing, that's their branch of religion. And you're starting to see maybe, I don't know, a little confusing stuff with all these branches of Christianity. I know we kind of simplify it today, but there are so many different branches, and oftentimes they don't like each other, where if you want to change up the main religion, you got to go out of town. So these guys were trying to reform the Church of the Netherlands, so they have to leave the Netherlands, and that's why they're going to found New Amsterdam. So more on that as we go forward with the different branches of, say, Protestantism, but this is one of many. And again, just to put in perspective of how many branches of Protestantism there are, just kind of think about what's in this room. I bet we have at least 10 different branches just in here. Say some Lutherans, say some Baptists, say some this, some that. I mean, just think about all the different churches, and they all tweak religion a little bit differently. So this is one of those tweaks. By the way, the Dutch, They were only 5% of the population. The English wanted that land, and the Dutch give up without a fight. They're like, okay, Duke of York, you can take all of this. So New Amsterdam becomes New York. The Duke of York just kind of took it because the Dutch were outnumbered and they didn't want to fight. You okay on brief Dutch history? Kind of interesting. New Amsterdam becomes New York. Ooh, we need a lot about Pennsylvania. William Penn, founder of Pennsylvania, also in the middle, is going to be a safe place for his religious group, the Quakers. Now, I got to show you this picture of a Quaker church service. And you might notice it's like different. What do you see in this church service? They're like in a circle. And the Quakers, by the way, will get their name because when you feel it, when you got your connection with God, you speak, or quake, as they're called by their opponents. And these guys are going to be hated by other religious groups because of their unorthodox kind of equality in preaching and relationship with God type thing. The Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church, was very rigid in its hierarchy. And I guess I first need to clarify that if it sounds like another confusing branch. This means the Church of England. Anglican, aka Church of England, they're one and the same. But under the Church of England, you've got God, then you have the king, then you have ministers. And they tell you how it is. The people in the congregation do not speak, they listen. A Quaker church service, you speak when you feel it. So just kind of think, they're about equality. And one side note, you know who could also speak in that church service when they feel their connection with God? Women. They believe in equality between men and women. And that would be totally frowned upon with some of the very rigid denominations that are out there. So these guys are different. They don't believe in war. By the way, an interesting side note, a lot of people claimed to be Quakers in the 1960s because if you could prove you're a Quaker, you don't have to fight in an unpopular war. What unpopular war was happening in the 1960s? And if you were a Quaker and you could document it, you don't have to fight. It's called a conscientious objector, where you could be like, no, I am a Quaker, this is my church, see, here's the program. Then you wouldn't have to fight in that war. Have you guys seen Hacksaw Ridge?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy was a Quaker. He didn't fight, but he was a medic. So Quakers don't fight. Their holy experiment is what this whole thing is called. If I ever ask you a question like which colony was known as a holy experiment for the Quakers, you plug in Pennsylvania. So holy experiment, Pennsylvania. They're also, get this, friendly to Indians. They don't want war. They believe in like fair treatment. They coexist. And they're one of the few that will actually have a friendly Indian policy. For the most part, those others, it's a constant state of war, but not the Quakers. One more side note, they're the first to be against slavery. Wow, interesting. On the right side of a lot of history here, yes? But back in the day, they're hated by a lot of other groups. I got to show you a picture of what happens to a Quaker if they venture into Massachusetts, but do you need any clarifying detail on the Quakers? This is what happens to a Quaker if they venture into Massachusetts. Remember I told you they could speak freely? Yeah, you don't do that in a Puritan church. In a Puritan church, it is like very rigid with a minister almost scolding the congregation about the dangers of hell. But a Quaker, hey, you feel it, you speak. Well, this guy's getting his tongue like bored through with a hot rod. They're taking away his ability to speak through near torture. There were women, Quakers, who would venture into Massachusetts who were stoned to death. And that's like stones piled on you until you suffocate, collapse, and die. So yeah, Quakers need their safe place in Pennsylvania. Don't be different in Massachusetts Bay because the Puritans, they don't like diversity. But the Quakers, interesting group. Last slide of the day, people. I need to clarify the Puritans and the separatists, and it's a big topic, so much so I spend most of tomorrow just talking Puritans. But I think, gonna get a working definition first, and then I can like help you out with where all of this is going. Puritans are gonna stay in the Church of England. And remember that Church of England, you remember yesterday when I said the Church of England was Protestant-ish? If you heard me say that, if you remember that, if not, I'll clarify it one more time. The Church of England was formed so Henry VIII could do what? Get a divorce. So basically he's like, hey, creating new religion so I can get a divorce, but then he kept everything Catholic. So the Church of England was still very Catholic, Protestant-ish, because he uses the Protestant Reformation as his break, if that makes some sense to you. Well, these guys want to purify the Church of England. They want to get the Catholic out of the Church of England. They want to purify it. The separatists are so extreme, they leave the Church of England. They cannot take the Catholicism that is still there, so the separatists separate from the Church of England, and I'm going to give you a big hint. They're going to go on a pilgrimage. They're going to first go to the Netherlands, but they'll be kicked out of the Netherlands. So then they go on another pilgrimage to the New World, and they settle in Plymouth. What are the separatists more commonly known as? Pilgrims. Plymouth Rock, kind of a made-up thing, by the way. But Plymouth, Pilgrims, 1620, and I guarantee you know the friendly Indians that they meet, who teach them how to farm and harvest, and then they celebrate that harvest. Thanksgiving. Squanto. See, we know some stuff about all of this. Squanto is with the Wampanoag tribe, if you're curious. But hey, we have some more friendly relations. Does that mean it's a forever piece of hand-holding and skipping through history? No, it's going to get cruel pretty soon to the neighboring Indian tribes. But hey, we got a couple years of peace. Who would I guarantee you know this? You know their political document that says they're bound by the will of the majority. It's named after the ship that they come over. The Mayflower Compact. More seeds of representative government. More seeds of democracy where, again, they're bound by the will of the majority. There's not going to be a dictator telling them all how it is. They get to vote on that person, and they do vote for this guy, the governor of the Pilgrims, for 30 years in a row. So he's the super pilgrim leader, William Bradford. Yes, it's making some sense? Okay, so Puritans stay in the Church of England, separatists separate. Separatists leave the Church of England. And I know I've got a lot of clarifying that I need to do, and I'll start out tomorrow and do that for you. But just a quick side note, all of these guys are later just kind of going to merge with the Puritans. How many boats did they come over on? And how many numbers of pilgrims are there? A couple hundred. Well, there's 30,000 Puritans who are coming over. And the Puritans are going to settle Massachusetts Bay. So Massachusetts just kind of absorbs Plymouth. Plymouth, it's a short-term thing. So Massachusetts will absorb a lot of its surroundings because there are so many of these Puritans that are coming over Emily.
Wait, so the Puritans are, which one created Plymouth?
Pilgrims.
So that was the separatists?
Yeah, Pilgrims are the separatists. They separate from the Church of England and they go on a pilgrimage, like a holy trip. And they basically had no authority to be there, but they're like, hey, new land, we're going to be there.
So there were no Puritans in.
Puritans come later. Puritans are going to come by the tens of thousands. You'll see, and that's where I'm starting tomorrow. But this is as far as I wanted to get today. And I feel like the closing questions are pretty aligned to all of this content. And I know it gets confusing when I'm throwing all these different religious denominations at you. Trust me, it is a confusing topic. Studied theology in college for 8 years, and you still won't know it all. I'm just trying to give you a brief introduction. And again, I think the closing questions can focus you on what you need to know. Talk to each other, and I think you'll get it. Talk to me, and I'll help you out. Are we learning? Are we feeling good? But hey, eventually you guys are going to be like rapid fire, like Quaker colony, Pilgrim colony, Catholic colony. Eventually, you guys will be there. I know you're not there yet. That's totally okay. That's why we're starting the process. Gracie, you know the Quaker colony. Pennsylvania. Emily, Catholic colony. See, that's where we need to be. Not there, but Catholic colony. Massachusetts. You're dead if you're a Catholic in Massachusetts. You go to Maryland and you're safe. So that's why we're sorting it out now. We've got Quizlet. Quizlet is your friend. You'll get it. I've got 2 more days to like rehash this stuff. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. Let me know how I can help. Then my volleyballers, you'll miss, I guess, on Thursday. And Friday, you miss the quiz. Thursday, all you're going to do is miss the lecture, which I upload by the end of the day. And it'll feel like you're here because I record your lecture.